Steve is supposed to be here with me. Let's see if he can get added in. We're going to have a lovely discussion about confrontation. Now, earlier this morning, my post showed a picture of a woman hitting a man with the frying pan over the head and being completely oblivious to the communication of like that, frustration, maybe not listening, not being a part of a proper communication. We are really having there you are. Good morning.
Ta-da. Good morning. How are you?
Good. We had
it's
a bunch
good noon
of
here,
on.
yeah.
Good morning. We have a bunch of friends on first thing this morning. Unfortunately, I had to start up twice, so I'm sorry if you got notified twice. Did you get noticed?
Oh no, notified twice? I've had it with you.
My lack of ability to function this morning. So I was just sharing with everyone today we have a great conversation on getting triggered. So it'll be, yeah.
Yeah, and that's always amazing because in my second marriage, I spent 21 years in an absolutely combative relationship. I was just as bad as she was, but we screamed and hollered and we could trip each other's triggers in an instant. And we never did learn, at the end, probably the last 3 years, I learned how to ignore that kind of thing. But she was excellent at just, snipping and snapping, and it was like, ow, ooh. And when you realized what she was doing, then it was like, I'm not playing that anymore. But for 15 years, we went through 3 years of good marriage in the beginning, then 15 years of absolute miserableness. And then the last 3, she was miserable and I was doing okay. We were both unhappy, but it was just, I learned how to deal with my own anger at that point in time. But learning how to argue is really vital, isn't it? Learning how to accept someone else, what they say, is vital.
I do. I think also, you're lucky your relationship didn't get climactic and get into a physical dispute. I know that, some relationships can get so volatile in this conversation of lack of connection and lack of healthy communication that it can get physical. I know somebody had posted earlier in one of the feeds that they had said, being physical is the end of a relationship. I agree. I would like to have a discussion about before those signs get into the mix. I would like to help people in the onslaught of not having a physical fight and looking for the clues.
A lot of times what we do is, and I thought Tamra and I had something worked out here. I was supposed to interrupt her and she was supposed to snap at me and then I was going to snap back, but she obviously didn't play the game. So anyway, what it amounts to is sometimes it's, like
today.
And it was one of those deals where I was going to interrupt and she was going to say, hey, you don't interrupt me when I'm talking, and I was going to jump back in and go, oh yeah, I have nothing ever to say, nothing, you never want to hear what I have to say, I've just had it, and that's how arguments really happen. That's how they happen.
See, and I warned you in advance. I wasn't going to be able to do it well because I'm so...
But anyway. That's, and I think that's a challenge, is that Tamra has learned how to develop her skills. I've learned how to develop my skills. Arguing is an absolute waste of time. Disagreements happen, but arguments, and we've had, I've got people in my life who holler at each other, get mad at each other, don't talk to each other for hours and sometimes days. And I'm like, wow, I remember those days and how difficult it was to wake up in the morning and be thinking, oh God, are they talking to me today? Yes. Right? And how miserable you felt. And that's part of not arguing correctly, right?
Right. Those are definitely the long-term side effects, like where you start realizing you're minimizing your voice, you're not speaking your truth, you're thinking you're walking on eggshells because you're afraid you're going to create some kind of big argument or friction, and you get in that state of like minimization. You're constantly minimizing your voice. Or if you're the instigator, which I think, we all instigate each other. I think it's kind of an equal thing. I know people believe that she started, he started, whatever. I think it takes 2 to fight, 2 to tango, or more. So I'm a believer of your reaction is what creates or stimulates or feeds the fire. And you also have, and that's your 50%. So like, you may not be saying anything, but your avoidance of communication can create more fire. So there's a lot of, that dances both sides. So I don't think any person is individually innocent. and good morning. And you have a chance to create that really cool opportunity if you're aware of your part, if you're willing to invest and become aware of what you're contributing.
And that gets back to the real key here is we talk about love all the time. What is love? How do you know what's love? The real key is if it's love, and I mean genuine love, you will be able to work through this. If what you have is somebody who's a manipulator, somebody who's an absolute taker, then you might not be able to work through these things. You could do all the things right, and you're still going to be in that situation that you can't win. And I was doing a workshop yesterday, but it was all about body language and how 86% of our what people perceive from us is nonverbal. And so when you're in that situation and you're rolling your eyes and you're just, you hear those sighs, you trigger the other person to be even more, and so that is, she's got it right. Tamra's got a whole thing there that says, if you want to improve your relationship, you have to learn how to deal with the triggers, right?
Yes, you really have to become aware. I just left an experience actually recently it only lasted a month because I was aware of the signs. You try to work it out, you start realizing it was a working relationship. It was not an intimate relationship. It's a little bit easier when you're in those spaces because you're not as emotionally invested, but it still can affect your ego and affect your stance of how you feel about yourself. And it is really important to understand that when you're in a space where you're kind of like, you're both not communicating in a healthy way, you take ownership of that. You sit there and go, you know what? This is not a match. This is not a working relationship that's healthy. And you actually end things in a very healthy way. You exit gracefully. You sit there and say, hey, this isn't really working out for me. Let me follow through to the end of the agreement or to a good, healthy stopping point where we're both in a healthy place for us to part. And I think that's accountability, taking ownership of your individual investment in the initiation of the relationship, and also following through to the end so you can hold your integrity. And I think a big part of communication that we don't acknowledge is not only how we're feeling, but how we're interacting in the experience. So it's not just communication, but it's your integrity. Where does your morals lie? How do you feel about the way you're showing up? Are you minimizing the way you feel? And my personal experience in this relationship I just had with this business person, I felt like no matter what I was doing, I wasn't matching the needs to their expectations. So I was not a match. I was not a fit. So I let go of the contract. I said, hey, here's where I can get you. These are the people I think you could maybe work better with. And you follow through to the end. And then you feel better about yourself. You don't feel like you failed. You actually accelerated your success, marker, because now you feel like not only did I support it, but I recognize that's not a place for me to be in. And I think in relationships, it's the same thing. When you're in a relationship and it's all great and wonderful in the beginning, and then all of a sudden it starts to die off. Are you recognizing the signs? Like, are you guys just not communicating anymore? Or is it a passive aggressive communication where you speak a little bit and they speak a little bit and nobody's really matching up? Because it's very passive aggressive when you do that.
I think when Tara's talking about that stuff, so many times you run across people who aren't married necessarily, and they're in a relationship, and they ask the question, how do I know when it's time to get out? Or what do I do if they're treating me like this? Well, you already answered that. You can fix certain things, but some things inherently, that's just not how it's going to happen. And that's not going anywhere. As she said, you're not a match. You may have started off, hey, we all got these wonderful feelings in the beginning where we're a match. And boy, it's just passion and romance and everything's working. And then 5 months down the road, you're like, what happened? And the answer is you're really not a match. You could make it work for that short term because that's where passion comes in. But when you're talking about a long-term friendship, which is the passion on fire becomes, your friendship on fire becomes the passion, that's when you have to say, will this be a long-term relationship? And in that, you also have to take that give and take, the ebb and flow, which involves arguing, which involves, are they really pushing your triggers on purpose? But it takes communication to ask that. You say, did you mean to do that? Did you mean to say that? Why were you saying it that way? I mean, that is the crucial part of survival in a relationship, is finding out what really is the other person's intent. I mean, if they don't have any clue, then probably counseling would be necessary. If they have absolutely no clue, that means they haven't been in a relationship that talked about this before. But quite often, it's a matter of they just go, well, if you can't take it, too bad. Hello, it's time for me to go, right?
Yeah, we run away, I think, a lot of the times from miscommunication because we didn't even do our self-checks. We'll have a tendency to go, oh, it's them, they're being irresponsible, they're being emotional, they're moody, they're this, they're that. But we actually may be looking, if we look inward and go, wait a minute, okay, wait a minute, I think the way I said that, the way I shared that, yeah. It could be something personal, that an opportunity for you to work through something yourself. So you're right, it's definitely an ebb and flow. And not to always put it on somebody else. You know, sometimes it's the balance of recognizing what's showing up in front of you right now is something for you to work through in that really cool moment where you're like, wow, this person's, and I love the term mirroring because you're being mirrored back your feelings. And you may, you know, I remember there's been times in the past where I'll like not realize I had tone in my voice and someone will say, well, gee, da 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 da, and they'll tone me back and I go, wow, I guess I had tone when I said that. That's right. And, you know, we all do it. It's very human. We have our minds are going 5 million different directions at one time. And, you know, we have demands pulled in so many different directions. So we're not being mindful in our communication when we are talking to someone, even if we don't love them. It could be just, you know, check out at the clerk, you know, you just, you know, a passerby. And wow, she was a little attitudey. Well, maybe you showed up with attitude. So there's that really cool, or maybe they're having a bad day and you're making it about you. There's always that, you know, that you should always do that inner check and make sure it's
that's right. That's exactly right. That inner check. Sometimes when somebody responds to you in a way, you can look at them and go, okay, what did I do? And you can do that in a moment. That's what's fascinating, is what did I do to get them to react that way to me? Now, maybe you did nothing. Maybe it's they're having a bad day, but you have to do both sides. So what am I doing to warrant that kind of response? Or how can I forgive them for being in that place because they're having a bad day? Yes. Both are, yeah. Mm-hmm. Both are important, that you start to survive and start to understand that it could be you, it could be them. And either way, it's okay, right? Yeah. We have to learn how to communicate better.
So going back into arguments, you know, usually arguments happen because we're not being in full of our integrity. We're out of balance. We're in a place of impasse. A resistance creates that friction. So we'll sit there and say, you know, let's pretend one for you and I, because I think it'll be easier to work out if we role play it, I guess, a little bit. You know, maybe we had a miscommunication.
So when I interrupt you, yeah.
There you go.
So when I interrupt you and you say,
oh, wait a minute.
Wait, are you telling me what I have to say isn't worth it? Is that what you're saying? So nothing I ever have to say to you is worthy, and probably nobody wants to listen to what I have to say anyway. I might as well not even talk.
Right. So we go into that self-deprecation, where we like literally, you know, we're not valuable, we're not important enough, nothing we have to say. Right? There's a real extreme attitude. So you start to recognize, you know, all those moments where we're like, you know, we're making it about ourselves and we're starting to really add on this guilt and this shame. And a lot of this stuff came from our childhood. You know, we're just playing it out again and again and again, trying to seek value in each other. But really, the opportunity could be that maybe I'm not listening with my ears, but I'm listening with attachment, trying to like make someone understand my perception or my thoughts, and we start to disconnect. And so maybe at that moment, instead of trying to, you know, move away from controlling the conversation, what's that?
Oh, Jerry piped in. She said, I recognize that gesture, Steve. Thanks, Jerry.
Sometimes we'll pull away from connection because we feel like we're not valued. So maybe it's the fact that we're not listening with the right ears. We're listening with attachment. We're trying to get somebody else to understand. We're trying to control the conversation. And sometimes just creating that big step back, I call it kind of like a timeout or a dove. I call it quite often dove. Is just taking a brief step back.
Dove? You call it dove?
Dove, like a peace sign.
Like
you know,
peace? Like peace?
Yeah, like peace. You know, a lot of religions look at dove. I think of the innocence of a white dove, right? It's very peaceful. And you really have that opportunity to create that space, that real good connection. And if you let someone speak fully without putting on projections and owning those emotions, you can actually see they're just talking about their pain and their experience that they're having. So you can discern. You get that really cool opportunity to pull back and really see a deeper connection or a better understanding from somebody else. versus that boiled up anger of somebody not hearing you, and you're always interrupting me, and you're ready to bop them on the head with the frying pan. You know, that obviously that was kind of a joke, but I get, you know, the physical behavior is not okay. But
nothing personal there, I'm sure.
No. But it's really important to understand that that is a boiling point. Somebody has gone too far and waited too long before they've actually expressed their feelings. And that's just all that is. I mean, I think a lot of people throughout a long period of history of relationships have like kind of added bricks onto the load of one relationship after another of not being heard or understood. And then they become more angry in their communication and resentful. They get real angry at society. They kind of boil over, if you will. And I think that there's an opportunity for them to slowly let off steam in a way that's healthy. And you can work with people like that. A lot of my clients I work with are in a lot of resistance. They feel like they keep on having the same relationship over and over again, or they're sick and tired of fighting the same fights with their wives or their spouses. And so they get to this pressured boil point. And I think there's this really cool opportunity to communicate where there's a slow fizz that comes out versus this anger. And that takes art. That's an art itself. That is a skill set that's not necessarily what we've been taught over time. And, you know,
absolutely. One of the shortcomings for us as a society is not being taught how to deal with conflict, how to find the resolution, how to be heard. And that's where I think most of our conflicts happen, especially when we're talking about when they get to violence, is because somebody's feeling either not validated, ignored, and so when that happens, they put it aside. They're like, oh, I'm going to let this go. And little by little, I always tell people, you know, it's what's worth arguing about. We talked about that in the beginning of our series. What's worth arguing about? Only about 4 or 5 things. But you never know what's going to be that little stick that breaks the camel's back and has somebody else either go off and create violence or walk out and be gone forever. So you have to start looking for the ways to communicate better. We say, hey, go see a counselor. But that's what she and I do all the time. We work with people who have trouble communicating with their partners. Sometimes we work with, you know, how come they're not getting a new partner? And the answer is because of who they are right now, right? Right. But part of that, yeah, but part of that is if this is who I am right now, then I'm not going to be able to find a partner because I create these situations with that other person, and they might connect on a short term, but then they're gone. You know, I've got one of my celebrity friends just connected with what they are now considering their new life partner, and you know, I'm looking at the relationship going, wow, really? And so it'll be a want and see because I know this person's personality, but I don't know the other person's personality. And so the challenge comes with when you know what somebody does in a relationship because of how they treat other people all the time, you wonder if that's going to carry over in a relationship. And communication is all about a two-way. How Tamra and I get along together, how we communicate with each other, how we touch base with each other throughout the week, all that kind of stuff sets the stage for how well we communicate when we come on together and how well we get along. So as Tamra and I put together, we're putting together a new workshop in Tampa, February 9th. And so if you would like to come and come as a couple, that'd be great. Come as a single, that'd be great. But February 9th down here in Tampa, we're going to be working on how you can create better relationships. And that's going to be the key, as we're talking here, finding out how to do battle, right? Finding out how to be heard, finding out how to communicate, right, Tamra?
Absolutely, yeah. The art of the argument, you know, learning to navigate dispute and confrontation is truly just as important as having healthy communication and a sense of expressing love and connection. When we do this negative practice, we actually help ourselves come across clearer and understand our own shortcomings where we're showing up and playing small. So it's a very important element to understand both dynamics.
Yeah, so the question I have for everybody listening in as you listen to this original and then from the replay is when you get into an argument, first of all, what caused the argument? Ask yourself that question. What caused my argument? You know, how did it happen? And then you have to start talking to your partner about if this happened this way, does it happen that way all the time? Right? Because then there's a pattern. And the patterns are what help us really start to evolve and grow beyond that, what I would call pettiness. Even though it doesn't seem petty, when we have the arguments, they're big things. They're monsters, you know, sitting out there. And so I want you guys to talk to each other. So when you have an argument, what did you argue about? And the answer is real. Now, Tamra is real good at this. Go, I'll let you take over. What did they argue about? And that comes from different areas, right?
It does. It's usually our resistance to receiving. It's all this dispute of, it's our shame. I'm not enough, unlovable, unacceptable. You know, how it doesn't show up to us that way. That's the expression of it. But when in relationships, it's usually just the resistance of whatever we're not, it's not matching our belief systems, or it's going against the current of what we feel is love. So when that happens, we create arguments and friction in our communication. We start to like minimize each other.
So if my wife were to yell at me about not cooking dinner, right? And we have an argument about not cooking dinner. Is it about dinner typically?
It has nothing to do with dinner, unfortunately. It's the story of not feeling
all the guys went, what?
Nope. It's not even about taking out the trash. You know, it's about being a collaborative partner. It's about that connection, right? And how you show up and how you connect. Unfortunately, we give excuses to why we don't feel connected or loved, and it's really not the point. Those are just the stories of what we make up and why it shows up. But there's so much more there for us to be able to connect on a deeper level. So really going back into understanding again why you're in resistance and all that good stuff. I mean, that's the whole point where we do these workshops, is we get a chance to really break down the individual understanding of why you carry that story, what's going on, and where is it showing up in your life? Because it's not just showing up in your love relationships, it's showing up everywhere. So you just, the opportunity is everywhere to be worked out. And so why not play in a healthy space where you're supported and really accepted for where you are and who you are at this very moment, to grow and be more. I mean, that's just what the whole point is, for us to support each other.
I think what's funny is the other night we were sitting here, my wife sits across from me in our office, and she said something, I don't know, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, she said, hey, I'm kind of hungry. I went, oh, and then we talked about what she had to eat all day, and she's lost 18 pounds in the last month and a half, so she's really happy where she's at. But she goes, hey, I'm hungry. And I went, oh, okay, and I kept on working. About 30 minutes went by, and she said, maybe you didn't hear me. I said, I'm hungry. And I went, okay, right? What do you want me to do about it? And she said, well, when I say I'm hungry, you're supposed to cook, because I'm the cook in our family, and she's the repair person. And I went, oh, I said, well, you hinted. Men don't get hints, right? If she says, hey, I'm hungry, would you fix me some dinner? I'm like, oh, no problem at all, go fix dinner. But if she sits and goes, I'm hungry, right? Now, in another relationship, that might create an argument. Because then the wife is thinking, you don't care about me. You don't even, you don't want to do the things that I need, blah, blah, blah. And so it's important to understand what the other person is asking for, what they hear, what they mean, right? So the intent and what you want to accomplish is always like, hey, let's look at it from a different perspective. And so when she finally came out and said, hey, I'm hungry, I mean, I could have responded with, well, it's not my job to feed you. What is this all about? I'm working. I got things to do. But
good for you. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. But if you understand the dynamics, right? The dynamics are that, hey, it's about dinner time. It might have been an hour earlier for me than it was for her, type thing. But, that's how it works. And if we understand and try hard to relate to the other person, you're going to get along better. I mean, if I look at Tamra all the time, and when I tune into Tamra most of the time, she's climbing rocks somewhere, right? Now, I don't know if Tamra's a cook. I don't know what she does. I don't know if she eats, gelatin all the time. I have no clue what she does in her personal life. But I think, okay, if we got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I go work out on my weight machine, and she looks at me and says, hey, I'm going rock climbing right now. If she expected me to go climbing today, then she should have told me night before so I can go, oh, we're going climbing. Okay. Right now I'm prepared. But if she said, hey, I'm going climbing, and then she comes back in a bad mood and goes, why didn't you go climbing with me?
Right.
I didn't know I was supposed to.
That attachment to the outcome, we, instead of inviting, I'll say, hey, I'm going to go da-da-da-da, maybe say I'm going to go hike or something, and somebody says, hey, I'd like to come with you. Sure. Doesn't necessarily mean that you can't ask to be included too. I mean, it's a two-way street. We have to communicate in a neutral way. And I agree with you. if you're expecting someone to join you to go do something, you should probably be asking and not just dropping hints, because that is a deadly path. Yeah. And a lot of men and women still communicate by hints, you know, and that's, I call speaking code. I don't have the code book to your code, you know, it's like, that's just an unhealthy way to communicate. And so if you speak with transparency and you allow someone to be in your space, hey, I'm going to go hike, that doesn't mean necessarily I don't want you to go, and you could ask, or if you want to go, I'm just letting you know where I'm going. You know, it's a real cool opportunity for people to like invite themselves, or maybe say, oh great, you're going to go hike, I'm going to go to the gym, you know. And
it's real important, on that if she said, hey, I'm going to go hiking, and I turned around and looked at her and said, do you want me to go with? If she said, I don't care, that negates my feelings. And so I now have hard feelings because she doesn't even care if I go. Ah, crap. Why should I even think about it the next time? As opposed to, hey, I'd love to have you go, or this is not the day because, Steve, you're chubby and I'm climbing the tough rocks today.
Okay, well, that's really interesting you bring that one up, because I got one for that. It's not my job to control what you do either. So to manage your feelings and sit there and say you got your feelings hurt for that, I don't care. It could be, what? Sure, if you want to go. It still puts it on you, because I don't know what your comfort level is. And my hiking is, you know, climbing Camelback, and you may not be comfortable climbing Camelback. So it's really these minute like dances. It's a great one that you brought up right now, because I think it's so fascinating when you say, hey, do you want me to go with you hiking? It doesn't sound like you're really inviting or asking, hey, can I go with you? Is it like, yeah, sure, you could come, that'd be great. Do you see what I'm saying? It's that ambiguity, again, going back and forth. Well, hey, do you want me to come with you? Well, I didn't exactly ask you to come, but if you'd like to come, come. Big difference in our communication style.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really interesting. Why we get hurt is basically because of what we say and what we think, not what the other person's saying to us. We're making conclusions, we're making assumptions. So I think that's a really great example of how even like my feelings would get hurt. Yeah, well, because I didn't ask the question right. You know, if I had said, hey, I'd love to go with you, do you mind if I join you? Absolutely. You know what I'm saying? You got to show interest too. So it's a very,
you know, and it's funny that I teach business courses too. So I teach salesmanship. And we work on people on their scripts. We work on all these things, and people, you know, especially the guys are like, man, I got to learn this, man. I need to learn how to close better. I need to how to communicate better. Yeah. And yet when we come to a relationship, we don't put in the same effort at all. You know, I mean, I always go back to, okay, if I'm trying to close a deal and I said, okay, you're ready to buy? Most of the time they'd go, oh, no, I don't like that, right? But if you said, hey, would you like help with me being able to close that whole thing? They'd go, oh, yeah, I would like your help doing it. See how we answer it, how we script it. But when it comes to relationships, we're like, why do I have to work that hard? Isn't that funny?
Not. That's exactly true. Yes, you don't have to work that hard. That's exactly the point. We leave that gray area because we're so worried about hurting someone's feeling, or speak what you want, say what you need, you know, let us know, because a person can say, you know, I really love you to come with me, but not this time, because I'm going to hike Camelback and I don't know how comfortable you are, and I know I go really fast. Not that I don't want you to come, I just really want to get a great burn today. You'd be like, oh, I get that. I'm going to go to the gym. You know, it's not that you're excluding, you're including. You're just saying not today, you know, and that's that really cool. When we have healthy communication, people will realize they're not being rejected. It's the attachment to not being rejected that's the problem. That's where we come up short. Yeah, so it's kind of a fun one. That was a good one. Thank you for sharing that. I love it when we do that. What?
that worked. But that's, you know, when we talk about, we're only about 3 minutes from wrapping this up typically, but when it comes time for arguing or fighting in a relationship, if you go back to the Facebook page that Tamra put up today, it shows a guy like on the phone and his girlfriend, wife, whatever, his partner behind him with a frying pan ready to clobber him. And sometimes it shows how clueless one person is. And if your partner is that clueless, then there's something you're not getting or they're not getting. And boy, sure needs to be talked about, because that's important that you sit down and say, you've got me to this place. And I say, you've got me. And Tamara, I'll say, no, you got yourself to that place. But however it happens, we got to this place, I feel this way. I feel this way because of things that happened here. And then you open that conversation. But if what you open with is you're to blame and you're at fault and you're terrible at it, you're not going to gain anything in your relationship. And how many people want to argue in a relationship? I certainly don't.
It's a different kind of relationship. That's one I try to avoid.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, some people, and the funny thing is some people do argue, and you try not to spend time with these people, but I've met people and you end up like becoming friends, and then you hear them argue in front of you 2 or 3 times, and you end up going home going, boy, that was uncomfortable. And then they wonder why you don't invite them again.
You know, and I think there's a lot, that there's the optimist and the pessimist, right? I think a lot of people in our society have used pesticides. I can't even say the word. Being pessimistic.
Oh, pessimistic. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, being that way as an excuse, instead of really understanding that it's an actual ignorant space. And I don't mean to be rude, but it is a very ignorant space because you're not open to possibility. So there's a balance, between all of that.
Did she call me stupid? Did she call me
stupid? But I think it's important to understand that there is a point in time to be in that space, where you're in resistance and kind of pushing against opportunity. But also to recognize why you do what you do. There's times where we are open and ready to receive more, and there are times where we're not really that open. And to know that, because there's a dance there. And I know a lot of people think, sarcasm, I see this all the time, sarcasm, I'm sarcastic. That's actually not a positive thing. And when you post that on your, I'm sarcastic personality, as if it's a feature, is actually a big red flag to stay away.
I think when I was doing that, I posted it as a warning because a lot of people didn't get my sarcasm. And it was like, ouch, they'd go, you're rude, you're mean, you're this. I went, when? I was like, when? And they were like, when you said this, I went, oh.
Yeah.
So I had to warn somebody that I was very sarcastic.
The sarcasm humor is one thing. Sarcasm is negative. It's not a positive. Sarcasm is usually someone's, it's someone's loss. It's not humor. It's pointing out the flaw of someone else. And usually it's, a little bit deep, it's jarring. It's very intense. And so humor is a great exchange for sarcasm. I love to laugh a lot. I like to be humorous. I like to play. That's great. Those are great traits. But sarcasm's kind of that passive-aggressive lack of voice, it's real jabby. And so I think that if people understood what they were really saying about themselves, they'd understand why they're getting the people they're getting in their relationships. Because, when you are real jabby with the tongue, you'll get somebody who can stand that, who can handle that kind of relationship. So, there's that dance. If you're fun and you like to play and you like to joke around, that's different.
And that's a really good point. As we wrap this session up, if you know you're sarcastic, it might be something you want to look into as to why you're so sarcastic. I was sarcastic for decades, and part of it was self-deprecation. Part of it was protection because that way you could do certain things. People would say you're pretty passive aggressive, and I don't even know what that means. I have no idea, right? And I didn't at that point in time. And then you start to realize what's going on. And when somebody says your sarcasm hurts, then you have to go, oh, and you have to start looking for methods to find your way out. So a lot of times that is through counseling. A lot of times it's through just realization of what you're doing and listening to what people say back to you. Yeah. It'll cost you relationships. It'll cost you money at work. It'll cost you all kinds of things. And while some people will find you funny, a lot of people will avoid you just for that part of your personality. So that's why you need to get with Tamra and I. Come February 9th of this next year, of 2019, come down to Tampa, and we will help you work on yourself, work on your relationships, work on what you can do in every aspect. So if you come down, maybe you should open a conversation with Tamra. And see what she can do to help you before you even get there. So if you say, my greatest challenge in my relationship is, write to Tamra. And Tamra, how do they get hold of you?
They can send off a little email off to Tamra at tamrablankenship.com. I do have a link down below. We will be putting together a little sign up for you guys in order to actually go to the class if you're interested, the workshop. If you're just looking to work with either one of us privately, by all means, let me know in that email and I'll connect you with Steve, or you can actually connect to him here on Facebook. So either way, works great. This has been a great chat. I really appreciate you coming in and talking to me about arguments and a little discomfort. Next week, again, we will talk more about relationships. So looking forward to seeing you all then. Thanks, guys.
Yep. Have a great week. Bye.